Hi everyone, we're here today with Andrew Hoppin. Andrew, hi.
Hi.
Welcome, thanks for joining us.
Pleasure to be here.
Why don't we start by just having you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
So I'm Andrew Hoppin, as you said. I'm the Chief Information Officer of the New York State Senate, which is a new role created in January of 2009 when there was a change in political leadership of the Senate after many decades under a different political leadership.
Sure.
And that role is created to help the Senate become the most participatory, the most efficient, and the most transparent legislative body in the country that would serve our mandate and our mission. Not because we need to be better than anyone else, but because we wanted to set a high bar.
Sure.
And my background is as an entrepreneur in the private sector. I've started a number of small web application development companies and also worked in government at NASA and in the nonprofit sector for open source software development organizations.
Perfect. So we're here this week at the Government 2.0 Summit, and Research Access is talking to people a lot about how we use new tools and technologies, especially in the public sector, how governments can use new tools and technologies to connect with the public, to hear what the public has to say. But let's start a little bit talking about what the challenges have been in the past to that point. What have been the major stumbling blocks or challenges to government using technology to listen to the public?
I think partly cultural. I mean, there's been a certain way of doing things that has continued perhaps longer than it would have been able to in the private sector. In government, I think, because you don't have that sort of direct bottom line of seeing, customers leave or sales drop off. You have your 20 million New Yorker constituents, and you're going to have, you may or may not get reelected as an individual elected official, but there's still going to be 20 million and growing New Yorker constituents regardless. So I think there haven't been the same kind of forcing factors for evolution and for integration of technologies to collaborate, technologies to communicate in government as quickly as there have been in the private sector. But this conference is proof positive that that's fast changing. And the train has very much left the station, as we all know. 2000 was really the year of open government, and 2010, I think, is shaping up to be perhaps the year of participatory government. And we look at those as really two paths of the whole.
Great. What are some of the most exciting developments in that space, especially from the stance of participatory government? What are some of the things that you're doing at the New York State Senate that follow that path?
Yeah, well, we're still in 2010, so I wouldn't say we're still in the experimental phase in terms of the actual new ways to engage citizens in hands-on in government. We've tried some things that have not succeeded particularly well. We did some ideas crowdsourcing, for example, early on, and we had a lot of interest on some issues from the public, not a lot on others, and then our biggest challenge in terms of actually making that make a difference was actually integrating that into the traditional legislative process of making a bill. How do you take this public ideas forum, and turn that into a seat at the table? We're very excited about ideas crowdsourcing because we feel like it can solve the scaling issue of 20 million New Yorkers, 62 senators. How do you listen to 22 million people if you're 62 people, right? And so the traditional workflows of, I call my senator, or I email my senator, or I show up in my senator's office don't scale. Obviously, only a certain number of people can have seats at the proverbial table. Technology and ideas crowdsourcing in particular has the potential to solve that scaling issue, but we haven't nailed it yet. Okay. We're very excited to see what people like Neil Dash are doing in Expert Labs in that regard, though, trying to find new, and the folks here at Gov20 Summit from Idea Scale at the federal level, I think they're starting to figure it out. They're starting to refine the systems and the workflows that actually can make that ideas crowdsourcing work. The things that have worked very well for us are much simpler and don't necessarily solve the upside of really truly solving that scaling problem, but I think are still a big change and an important one, such as we take public comment on all our bills on a public-facing website. Historically, you had to pay money to even get access to the bill data, so only lobbyists and media and people who could afford it, and were really sort of the inside baseball policy community in New York were even getting the legislative data, let alone having a seat at the table and a voice in the process. Now anybody can post a comment on any bill online, and it's in public, so that there can be a public discourse about a bill online, and that's still the only legislative body that does that in a way where it's actually on the Senate's website itself. So some senators pay a lot of attention to those comments on their bills, some senators don't pay any attention at all, so there's still a challenge on changing the workflows of policy making side, but at least it's much easier to make your voice heard, as well as, of course, to find out what's going on.
What are approaches that you take to encourage that public participation? A lot of the challenges we've talked about people when they get this technology in place is nobody knows how to use it, nobody knows where to find it, nobody knows it even exists. How do you get the word out and encourage participation?
We simply follow the leaders, and the leaders being the private sector and the sort of the world of social media and Web 2.0. And we do that in two ways. One, we're active participants in and consumers of those technologies and tools. We spend a lot of time on Facebook and on Twitter, and we have friends that are starting startups that are social media startups in New York City. So by being of those communities and those cultures, we help to get the word out about what the Senate is doing and create a good feedback loop about how we're doing it with sort of thought leaders in the social media world. And then the corollary to that is internally socializing the use of social media. So again, getting senators and their staff to actually create Twitter accounts and create Facebook accounts and create their own YouTube channels. And by and large, that's actually been quite successful, partly because we put up our sort of directory of senators on the website has a little social media bookmark icon next to each senator name. So if you're
little pressure,
if you're not using it, it's kind of obvious. We don't necessarily put a value judgment on that, but at least it is transparent.
Sure.
And there's been some imitation, I think, of success by some people that might otherwise not have been early adopters because they've seen it work for some of their colleagues. So that's been very successful. Senators, by and large, are always interested in more ways to communicate effectively with their constituents, especially ones that don't cost money, and by and large, these tools don't.
I know you're a big advocate for open data and open frameworks and making sure that information is as shareable and accessible as possible. What are the what approaches are you taking to that? What do you see as the major tools at your disposal for ensuring that data is open and transparent?
Sure. So, open standards, right? So we make sure that we have XML and RSS and JSON feeds of all of our legislative data, for example, as well as all the other forms of content. Posting the data in its most raw, sort of straight from the source form. The full uncut video archives, for example, of Senate sessions, not just clips that could otherwise have been segmented to be the clips that weren't embarrassing to one party or another. And so that's sort of the basic bottom line prerequisite. And it's not just because it's the right thing to do from a transparency standpoint to post information in its most sort of raw, unadulterated form. It's also the most useful to third parties, obviously, because we're not going to build all the interfaces that meet the nuanced use cases of all of our potential end users. We can sort of we do the sort of the center of the bell curve. Like, what do we think most people would benefit from in terms of a GUI on top of legislative data? Well, we build that. We made it kind of look like Google or Bing, like search engine friendly, so it isn't just accessible to sort of policy wonks. But there are other people that have very different, very nuanced needs, and by making an API available and making the underlying open standards compliant data feeds available, we're able to have sort of a proliferation of different interfaces and applications built around this data, and that, of course, makes it more useful and accessible to more people. Similarly, we've been able to build now internal applications that consume the same data in the same API, so it's good for our purposes as well. So we can integrate, for example, into our new CRM system, direct links and actually pull bill data into constituent communications that are coming in and being processed by a CRM system that include the relevant metadata in context with that communication from the legislative data system. So we're able to juxtapose information and build sort of information dashboard applications for internal purposes much more readily because we publish this data externally already in this well-architected open form. So it helps us internally. It helps the citizens of the state as well.
All right, perfect. And what does the year ahead hold for your office, and what major initiatives are coming up over the next year for you?
Yeah, so we're in the process of deploying this new CRM system, which is, it had to meet the bottom line of doing a good job with the traditional workflows of citizen communication and between citizens and senators. Doing a good job tracking phone calls, cases, all that kind of stuff. But it's built in order to, with an eye towards really being a social CRM, one that could potentially go out and gather intelligence from the social web. So find and proactively alert a staff person to a conversation that's going on far away from the Senate's own website, say in a Facebook group or what have you, about an issue that staff person or senator may be working on, so that their literally intelligence can be drawn from that. So we're trying to build systems that are looking to that future where the senators and their staff will really be part of an ecosystem of work going on about issues that are important to their communities, and rather than having it be sort of a one-to-one or a group-to-one senator sort of binary relationship, which has been more of the historical workflow for participation in influencing of the policy process. So that's really the future, I think, is trying to engage more minds in making better laws, making the people that are governed by those laws really understand what is being considered and feeling like they have a voice in it. And I think that requires kind of turning these institutions inside out so that they're not only transparent, but they're also the people in those institutions, literally the policymakers themselves, are participating in these social media communities that are about specific issues and about specific communities, so that they actually are participants and peers, rather than just sort of the king or the queen on a hill being contacted by a lobbyist or by an advocacy group.
Absolutely. Perfect. Thanks for taking the time to join us today.
Sure.
Enjoy the rest of the show.
Appreciate
it. Thank you.